function of the city. This refers in particular to how the urban morphologies and systems can be reconfigured at different scales to not only enhance their resilience to the effects of the pandemic, but also make them more sustainable and productive in the long term through inclusive planning. Two, addressing systemic poverty and inequality in cities, designing targeted interventions that mitigate the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 and related restrictions on poor and vulnerable groups through emergency assistance and service provision, while also taking steps to address the underlying causes of their exclusion. Three, rebuilding a new normal urban economy, developing a suite of tailored economic support and relief packages to have smaller businesses, informal workers, and at-risk sectors to survive the crisis, with an emphasis on building back better by promoting the transition to greener, more equitable urban economies. We have seen that in this pandemic, it is the big businesses that have survived and even prospered. Four, clarifying the urban legislation and governance arrangements, recognizing the need for more integrated, cooperative, multi-level governance between national, regional, and municipal governments, with an emphasis in developing more flexible and innovative institutional and financial frameworks for cities to respond effectively to the unfolding crisis. This report can be downloaded from the UN Habitat website. Next slide, please. In the Philippines, we have applied many of these guidance together with the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, or DSUD. We have been working with a number of cities to demonstrate how to strengthen their capacities to assess risk and vulnerabilities, develop strategies, and formulate plans to increase their resilience. While many efforts have been done to improve resilience planning, the key is to translate the plans into detailed urban designs and bankable projects so they can be implemented with the participation of the widest range of stakeholders and investors. This slide shows images of activities that range from high-level strategic planning, citywide and ecosystem-based risk and vulnerability analysis, and integrated urban designs that disaggregate projects to be investment ready for implementation. Next slide, please. Equally important is building the resilience of communities and families whose actions directly impact the cause and often suffer the effect of disasters. UN Habitat has been implementing the People's Process, where people and families were involved in the whole project cycle, from project development, site selection, site planning, house design, construction, and even to financial management and quality control for both materials and construction work. For people to exercise meaningful participation, they have to be capacitated to perform their roles and responsibilities, and policies and systems have to be in place to enable them to do so. The results have been invariably consistent among our projects now implemented all over the country. And the results have been faster construction and resolution of issues, better quality of materials and construction, transparent and accountable finance, high level of acceptability, and empowered and inclusive community. All of these result in better structural and non-structural resilience of people and communities. We have seen this in our post-Yolanda rebuilding projects and post-conflict rebuilding in Marawi City, but we have seen this to be also be very effective in non-post-disaster situations. So in closing, resilience can be strongly built top-down through national and city planning, and also from the bottom up by empowering communities and families. The COVID pandemic has forced us to pause and rethink, and now we have the opportunity to recover and build more just, green, healthy, and resilient cities and communities. Thank you.
on importance to include communities and have communities at the center of any resilient building, and the importance of urban development and urban economies. We'll discuss this more in detail. I think it's some of interesting analysis can be drawn, what can be done now in the post-pandemic growth that we hopefully all expect to see. But over to Marife for her presentation on smart cities. I think you have to unmute Marife. She's probably unable to unmute herself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Okay, I would like to talk about, can you please put up my slides? Can I ask the tech team to put up? Yeah, okay. So the smart city is actually the future for building inclusive and resilient cities. The concept of smart city in the last decade has actually evolved from one that is centered on just technology, the use of ICT, to a broader concept of building ecosystems or cities that are powered by technology and innovation for better quality of life, sustainable environment, and competitive economy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, and actually this concept has been recently adopted in the Philippine National Standards for 37122, or actually that is the sustainable cities and communities. ISO actually is a lot. The smart city is actually aligned to sustainable development goals of people, planet, and prosperity. And that's when you say smart city, it's actually aligned to
I believe Marifa has some issues with the internet. Marifa, I don't know if you can hear us.
I can
but
hear
if
you.
the signal is too bad, perhaps you just go without a camera.
Yeah, can I do that? My internet's unstable. Yeah. Oh, okay. So next slide, please. Okay. I think the question is, how has smart city advanced inclusive housing? Admittedly, compared to e-banking and other e-transport, this is less popular. Housing and urban planning is rarely mentioned in smart city initiative. However, that has been changing as cities broaden their smart vision and and uh, and provide a more holistic view of the quality of life rather than just merely focusing on connectivity or connected infrastructure or what tech companies are pushing for. So on the ground, smart initiatives are actually seen in urban planning, the use of GIS and digital twins, in disaster preparedness and risk management through remote sensing and the digital twin, and housing technology. And the next slides that I will show you is just an example of how smart initiatives have been used in different countries. Like this is actually from Singapore. It's an e-planner which uses geospatial urban planning analytics tool. And by overlaying several data to a base map, you're able to assess, uh, to have a more informed, transparent decision and assess accessibility, population and housing locations, as well as the amenities. The next slide is the more advanced technology, and it is very interesting. This is actually from Kawayan City, Isabela, and the use of digital twin, which is basically a mirror image in 3D model of a certain location or area. And you can see the physical attributes, the structure, the condition. And when you populate it with information from the internet, from digital systems, then it's interactive. You can see the changes as well as you can do controls and regulation. Next slide, please. And this is also a recent one. It's a 3D printed housing, which is an attempt to lower reduce the cost of housing construction. So the question is, are Philippine cities ready for smart city? And we did actually a recent review of smart city initiatives. Next slide, please, in key urban areas in the Philippines. And what we found out is that there is a strong interest among LGUs to develop a smart city. However, at this stage or at this time, we are still in the development or the inception phase. And this is even for highly urbanized cities. So most cities are actually still in the process of building the infrastructure, putting up this Internet of Things, your sensors, cameras, and other digital subsystems, and also the databases. And if you look at the content or the focus of many of these initiatives, it's usually on safety and security, traffic management, crime prevention. And due to the pandemic, there is increasingly they're looking into infrastructure for e-health. There is actually very few initiatives on quality of the built environment, although there are already some initiatives on disaster risk management, like early warning system, water level monitoring, green lights. So these are we see this in some of the areas. The problem is it's not yet integrated. So our city planners are using the GIS. Yes, they are familiar with it, but it's not in a comprehensive way that, for instance, Singapore is doing it. And of course, because of data problem, there are only very few data that they could overlay into the base map. So an important issue or question is how we can push LGUs to have that vision for a smart city. And we find that a major enabler, an important enabler of LGU smart city development is collaboration. You need collaboration between national government agencies with the LGUs, the development agencies, as well as the in the case of Kawayan, the local government are open in saying that they were clueless what this technology is all about. So it's basically capacitating the LGU, introducing them or enabling them for to have access to this technology. And so sorry, I can hear a noise at the background. Okay, so that's one. A collaboration is very important, and this is actually a call for our housing champions to engage our LGUs for smart city
that's
initiatives.
A collaboration is very important.
On urban
this is actually a call
disaster
for our
risk
housing
management.
champions.
The other important
engage our LGUs
aspect is
smart
for
city.
to have the
collaboration is very important.
on urban
This is actually a call for
you need
our
LGUs through
management.
ordinances or through legislative acts to be able to establish a smart city operations office. And this is just not necessarily that big because you need this IT operations unit, you need big data center, you need a command center with some where and this is already present in many of our cities, especially highly urbanized cities. And of course, the smart city service center, which is your interface between LGU, the public service, as well as the citizens. Of course, a key challenge, as always, is financing. But this can be addressed through public-private partnership. The private sector, as I have mentioned, in cities have been supporting smart cities initiatives. There are also international grants for smart city initiatives. And I think cities or the government itself should invest on smart initiative, as this translate into not only higher revenues and competitive economy, but more efficient and effective management of people and environment. So let me end on that note and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marife. Very good presentation, and also for giving us a perspective of how cities should look like moving forward in the Philippines, and then initial assessment of what is still missing, particularly in a lot of LGUs in the Philippines to move forward, and what are some of those enablers. Let's now move to Samuel for his presentation. Rajan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Maja. Are you able to hear me well? Hello, everyone,
Yes.
and namaskar, greetings from India. So in my presentation, I like to focus on 5 key pointers around building resilient cities and communities. And I'll try to decode it in terms of lessons learned and best practices from India. Habitat India has been, we have footprints in almost 26 countries, 26 states in India. And I'm going to be focusing on one state called Odisha, where we partner with the government in terms of, transforming slums into livable habitats through Jagan mission. Jaga means place in Sanskrit. And Habitat India has been promoting what we call as the structured housing support services. Yeah, next slide, please. So the first pointer is for us to understand what is Jagan mission. And, there is a political will from the government, and the government indeed has created an enabling environment by passing a few legislation laws relating to land rights. One is the Odisha Land Rights to Slum Dwellers Act of 2017. And the Jaga mission was launched on the 7th of May, 2018. So the vision of Jaga mission is to ensure that Odisha becomes a slum-free state by 2022. So I think that's a critical thing. One is to have an enabling environment and have the right policies in place, so that you're able to engage all other stakeholders. So that we work together with the government and with other stakeholders, including the communities, moving towards the vision of ensuring that Odisha becomes a slum-free state by 2022. My second point, next slide, please, is to look at the state-of-art technology being deployed by Jaga mission, by the government of Odisha. Why do we need to have a technology? Why do we need to use drone services, for example? And if you look at the picture, I've captured the drone flight path. And the critical thing is to survey and map out all the slums, and it took them about 7 months. And the government of Odisha has already issued land rights certificates, basically to promote in situ development for almost 1.78 million families. 650,000 slum dwellers are being supported by the government housing program, which is called PMAY, Prime Minister Awas Yojana, which is Prime Minister Housing Program, which is part of Housing for All mission. So the challenge is, how do we align what the government is doing in terms of the PMAY Housing for All program? Number 3 is that almost 570 slums have been already converted into livable habitat, livable cities. And they have won a couple of awards. And so the critical thing, the key takeaway from this experience is that, number 1, how do we deploy technology to get what we want? Number 2 is that data points are critical for the government, for other stakeholders. Number 3, you need to engage the community. let me move to the third point. Next slide, please. What is Habitat's role? So Habitat partnership is with the government is to promote the 4P partnership. I think that's critical. I think that's the heartbeat of the program. When you talk about infrastructure intervention, when you talk about promoting affordable housing, we talk about the hardware, we talk about the software, we also talk about the hardware. I think that's where the community comes in. How do we put the community at the center of everything that we do? So through our engagement with the government and in promoting structured housing support services, we're able to connect all the 4Ps. The first P is people, community. The second P is the government, because you have to get the land from the government, you have to get the work order from the government, you have to tap into the subsidy from the government. And the next P is the private sector. So you bring in private sector to finance. Sarah, in our initial remarks, she said that World Bank has 2% of the portfolio has gone into housing, affordable housing. And she also mentioned that we need to find a way to bring in the private sector so that they are able to finance. If you look at the typical houses that we are promoted in Orissa, it costs $5,400 for a 300 square feet house, and out of which $2,700 comes from the government as part of the subsidy for PMAY. And the balance $2,700 comes from a housing finance company. And how we were able to do that and how we were able to connect with the various dots. So if you look at the table, there are 12 activities that we promote and in the flow chart. And the critical thing is to intervene at this stage to empower families through housing support services. So we need to get the land, get the land rights certificates, get the work order, work with the housing finance company, do the demand generation until we are able to do their assessment and affordability assessment. We actually walk with the home partners. There is a lot of hand-holding that's required. And post the disbursement, we provide hand-holding in terms of ensuring that the money is spent for which it was given to the families. Number two, we monitor the quality of the construction. Number three, we make sure that the home partners are able to complete the house. There is an incentive that the home partners can get. If they complete the house within 4 months, they get 20,000 Indian rupees, that's $270. And post that, if they complete, they get about 10,000 rupees, which is $155. So there is an incentive. The key thing, a takeaway for Habitat is that through this partnership with the government, with the community, and with the private sector, we will ensure that all the houses are completed. Because one of the biggest challenge in any of the government program is that we see a lot of unfinished houses. In fact, we do have a fund, and we have done financing of unfinished houses even in a state like Orissa. So there are different players. Apart from Habitat, we have the housing finance company, which is Swatantra Housing Microfinance Corporation. We work with supply chain management. We also work with other stakeholders, and everything is to ensure that we connect all the dots and we are able to facilitate the families to complete the house. One of the key prerequisites of PMAY is that even if they have an existing structure, they need to demolish and start from scratch. So all the houses promoted through this partnership are brand new houses. So that is where we intervene. Let me move to the point number 4. Next slide, please. Here we are talking about use of technology. I think, I spoke about technology, and also we moved from another platform to Zoom. So we always need to find the right technology for the right target audience, and to make sure that people do have access to a simple phone. So here, what is a mobile technology? And this is a platform which will help us to manage the loan portfolio, which will help us to manage the construction of the house at various levels. Number 2, disbursement, both from the housing finance company and also from the government, because the subsidy gets released in 4 installments. So there's a smooth loan application and fund disbursement and repayment, because this model is called what the government of India calls it beneficiary-led construction, and what Habitat calls it as owner-driven construction model. And we've been promoting this for the last 38 years. And This project, educates future owners with digital literacy and technical know-how, because everything is done online. Why do we need to promote digital technology? Number one, it reduces your transaction cost. Number two, it will help you to scale up the program. Again, there are three critical drivers that we need to look at when you're looking at technology. Number one, can I scale up the program? You start with a pilot of 1,000 homes, but how do I take it to 10,000 and 100,000? Number one, scale is important. Number two, you have to ensure that the program is sustainable in nature, both for the community and for the organization. Therefore, we have a business model where there is a revenue even for the services rendered by Habitat India as part of the structured housing support services. And as I speak, 12 families have completed their homes in 4 months, and there is a subsidy, there's an incentive that's come from the government, and 11 families have tapped into 10,000 rupees with 135. So end of the day, for us, any model that we promote, 4P model, is to make sure that it's a viable product. Number two, scalable, replicable, and it has to make economic sense for the lender. That's my fourth point. Let me move to my next pointer. I know I've got only 2 minutes. Next slide, please. Let me end with these are stories of transformation. I was there in the community 2 weeks ago. The first community that you see there on your left is Gola, Bijaya, and Dina. This is a family. They have completed their house. They're very happy. You can see the smile on their faces. And this community, they are fishermen folk. And the interesting thing about this community is that they have an excellent cash flow. Nothing gets wasted. And the women folk are doing all the back-end services. The men folk go into the sea and they do all the fishing. But in terms of marketing, in terms of packaging, in terms of selling, it's all done by women folk. It's part of a self-help group. And I interacted with these families. The fish, if it's not sold, then they dry the fish and it is sold as dry fish. That's what I said. Nothing gets wasted. They have an excellent cash flow. And, so they have completed the houses and their house. And the second case study is Dana Lakshmi and family. They got $2,700 from the government as subsidy and $2,700 as a loan. And they've completed their house. Again, livelihood is critical. The poor needs to have cash flow in order to service the loan. And again, the key takeaway from this is, number one, you need to engage the community. Handholding is critical. Make sure money is fungible. You want to make sure that the money goes to construction. Number three, we have to make sure that they complete the construction on time so that they're able to tap into the, into the incentive. And the last thing is, they're the change agents. And they need to share the story in order to motivate others to get into this program. And in concluding, I'd like to mention two things. Number one, the market opportunity is huge. According to one UN data, by 2030, 2/3 of the world population will live in urban areas, urban cities, and we need to provide shelter for 2.82 billion families by 2030. That's a huge market opportunity. Number two is that when in Habitat, when we talk about housing, we talk about we not only build houses, we build homes. Because a home is built with passion, with dreams. We make sure that people live in our houses, are able to realize their dreams and aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajan, for this inspiring sharing. Indeed, we're not just building houses, but homes. And I think this story of transformation in Odisha, I think it's an inspiring for all of us. And we all have a lot to learn. I think it's a lot of relevance here in the Philippines. And I wish, I think we could learn more about it if we have time and perhaps even visit, not least for all the numbers you said of how big the challenge will be for urban settlements in a few years. Let's now move on to Marison. Marison, over to you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much, Manya. Can we run the presentation, please? Thank you. I think Ariane is going to be running the presentation in a minute or so. But I'd like to thank everyone for having us here today to share with you what we do in Base Bahay Foundation as well as the Hilti Foundation. Ariane, anytime you're ready, please. A very good day to all those attending this first virtual Philippine Housing Forum. As an introduction, Base Bahay Foundation was initiated by the Hilti Foundation in 2014 to help address one of the most pressing issues we face today: the lack of affordable yet secure quality housing, especially for those who are most vulnerable. The last 2 years and the effects of the pandemic continue to affect all our lives, and the need for safe and secure homes became even more evident, and responding to such need even more important. But even before the pandemic, we've already witnessed many families left vulnerable, living in makeshift homes in dangerous areas and suffering the brunt of every typhoon, every natural and man-made disaster, which happens quite often in the Philippines. Unfortunately, we see similar scenes in many other developing countries. Base Bahay Foundation, together with the Hilti Foundation, aims to address this through its cement bamboo frame technology used for affordable housing. Technology and innovation have always been core competencies of the Hilti Group, known for producing cutting-edge tools and solutions that create impact in the construction industry. And I'd like to quote the president of the Hilti Foundation. He said, "At Hilti, we are convinced that typhoons and earthquakes do not kill people. Mostly, it is bad construction that does. This is why we invest heavily in research and innovation." The Hilti Group operates in the more developed market segments, while the base team pursues these activities in a low-cost environment. Because why should low-cost environments with their specific context and requirements receive less attention than the high-end markets? End quote. Through the Base Innovation Center, launched earlier this year, we continue to improve and innovate the cement bamboo frame technology used to build disaster-resilient housing that is safe and secure. We believe that resilience, replicability, and the potential for scale are key ingredients to building sustainable cities and communities. We initiate research and development programs with many respected universities and institutions here in the Philippines and in other parts of the world, and together work on finding solutions that can be adapted and replicated in different environments. The bamboo houses we construct is more than the traditional bahay kubo that we all associate with bamboo. While many of the traditional practices were considered, this technology is accredited by the National Housing Authority's ITEC. It is an accreditation for innovative technologies in the Philippines. This accreditation allows us to secure all the necessary building permits. It is a system that's designed to resist natural disasters such as typhoons and earthquakes. So this means that we do not have to keep thinking of how we can rebuild homes after it's blown away or after it collapses in a storm, or if it comes crashing down during an earthquake. Further to this, the base team is also working together with the necessary groups and experts to help develop the standards for building with bamboo and incorporating this into the national standards for construction. But going beyond the technology, what's equally important is that this system has been designed to be quite simple. The simplicity of the system makes it highly replicable. It's also flexible and thus can be used to design homes based on the needs and wants of the communities, a very important consideration when we build for the vulnerable. Through our key partners, we conduct extensive training programs and transfer the technology to organizations involved in housing construction, community workers, construction workers, or to those who'd like to learn new skills so that they can use them for future jobs and future livelihood opportunities. Training programs that cover the different stages in the value chain are offered. This is supported with design and technical guidance from the base team. With the creation of the whole value chain from bamboo sourcing to house turnover, the base house has helped provide not just homes, but skills, livelihood, and a more dignified life for all those involved in the process. But like any technology, it would be irrelevant if it is not used for the purpose for which it was designed. This is why we continue to work with different partners. We continue to train and share the technology in order to achieve the scale that can create a greater social impact. In Base and the Hilti Foundation, we believe that if we continue to innovate and build better today, we will all have a brighter and more sustainable future tomorrow. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Marison. Thank you for that very clear presentation, and to the Hilti team as well, and the base team for developing such innovative solutions using local technology for affordable housing. I know we don't have much time left, but now would be an opportunity to engage with the participants. So I'm just checking if there are any immediate questions in the chat box. I haven't seen anything, but perhaps because we also have to wrap up. So I think I'll kind of summarize, something that we saw as kind of key takeaway points, but also wanted to call on you, our panelists, to summarize in 2-3 points. What are your key takeaway points from the presentations you've heard today, and what's coming up? And add to this something that would be like a catchy phrase for the Twitter. I know that the conference is also very active on the Twitter, so I think it will be helpful for the organizers to help them promote the event there as well. So please be mindful of that as you make your summary. So I think what was coming through today's presentation pretty clearly is the importance, on the one hand, urbanization, right? And urban planning. I think for particularly in the smart cities and what Chris was talking about. And equally important was Rajan was kind of introducing the importance to address land issues, as a precondition for any sustainable and permanent housing solution. We know land issues are one of those perennial problems also in the Philippines, so an important lesson learned in that regard. I think that the second key takeaway point that was kind of coming across from all your presentation was the importance to empower the communities, for them to have the ownership and to build their own future. We're talking about the community level resilience, the people-led and focused projects, and really treat the communities in a way as our clients. And connected to that, what I think was Rajan was coming in with this quite strongly are these market-based approaches. So I think that's something that is not as prominently featured in the Philippines, but with this microfinancing, potentially even microinsurance mechanism. So this is still very early days, but precisely because for the equation of building a house to come together, it is important for those solutions to be supported by the government, by the people, but also the important role that the private sector is playing in that. So I think that kind of came through strongly as well. And I think, Rajan, we have a lot to learn from what you were piloting in India. Let me stop here and pass on to our speakers, perhaps the best and easiest in the order that you were presenting. Chris, for the final thoughts, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mania. And I really learned a lot from the presentations of my co-speakers. Maybe I have 2 takeaways. One, when we talk about housing, we're talking about investments. And more often than not, we look at government and private sector and banks to do this financing. But the biggest investor in housing are the families themselves. And we can see this even in informal settlements. Families are building even at the risk of being evicted. So And that's why it's important to tap these resources to recognize this investment, because this investment also looks towards the future. They're investing also in their future. So we have to harness that investment by the families themselves. In the houses that we build, for example, when we go back after 1 year, there's a lot already of incremental housing that speaks also to Rajan's example. And that's why it's very important to train families in terms of the construction of the house, the technology of the construction, as well as the materials. When we went back to the communities that we have built, the families built it according to the technology that was used and using the same materials that was used for their housing. So it's really very important to transfer that skills to families. Yeah, that's basically my points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Marifa, over to you.
Yeah, I think there are two important aspects when we look at resilient and inclusive housing. One, I'm speaking from the experience of the Philippines, is space management. And the second is because, and this is relation to, you need a land for where they can build the houses. And the second is, of course, I forgot. The second is the the disaster risk management, because there are a lot of low income houses that are in risk areas. And as I mentioned, the future is really smart city, because for instance, just coming up with technology like the digital twin enables you to have an idea what are your resources on the ground, and that could be one of the reasons why LGUs or constraint in land is an issue. It's because you don't know really what are your resources, and being able to map that and manage the space is actually a very important aspect. And smart city initiatives can help uh, have a better and more efficient way of land management and space management. And of course, disaster risk management. So you know where immediately, in terms not only of response, but also in terms of where you should not be building. So even at the start, you already know, already be able to manage the disasters. Even at the start, if you have an efficient and effective a tool and information, so that you could be able to plan better and to decide and control or regulate better.
Thank you very much, Marifa, for those two key points. We remember them. So the space issues and the disaster risk and resilience. I think that's very important for the Philippines, and for sure every city needs to keep an eye on their DRR plans. Rajan, over to you. You're mute, Rajan.
Thank you much. The first thing is the social capital. I think that's important. I think people have the dreams and aspirations, and they also have the sweat equity and the drive and the determination. So how do we, as part of theory of change, how do we put people at the center? How do we put the community at the center of everything that we do? Number one. Number two is use of technology. I think it's critical. Even in our program, we have taught people, to make payments through NASH. That means before the EMI hits the account, they need to have the money in the bank. So I think when I talk about technology, I'm talking about the construction technology. I'm also talking about information technology. When I talk about scale, I think technology would kick in. And how do we make sure that we make the technology affordable and accessible to the poor and needy, and especially people at the bottom of the pyramid? And the third one is collaboration. I think synergy and convergence is what we need. If you want to make sure that the 4 Ps work, I think all the stakeholders need to come together because, like I said, the demand is great, is a huge market opportunity, but I think the synergy and convergence of key stakeholders are critical. And the last one is, I think you mentioned it, market-based solution. So if you don't bring in market-based solution, we will never be able to scale our programs. These are a few takeaways from me. Thanks, sir.
Thanks so much, Rajan. Thanks for these points and in a way for opening some areas to us here in the Philippines. I think your emphasis on social capital is also a very important. We like to say that the resilience is something that's embedded in the Filipino people. So I think that's drive and determination. It's definitely not in short supply in the Philippines, but then, kind of how to leverage that and how to kind of steer that in the right direction. Would be coming back for you on the 4Ps. 4Ps is something that has a strong meaning here in the Philippines. It's a kind of a government-led social safety net program, but I think it would be really interesting to add a new twist to it with the 4Ps you're proposing in your solutions. Marison, over to you for summary.
Yes, thank you. I definitely agree with all of the panelists today. And just to even emphasize further what Rajan was saying, it's really a synergy of different groups coming together to be able to build sustainable and resilient communities. So each group with its own expertise and skill set that they can bring to the table is really important. I particularly am also quite invested in the 4Ps, which is the people, public, private. And I think that's also going to be tackled in the Asia Pacific Housing Forum, and one topic that I'll be speaking on for that as well. But what was also quite evident in today's event was we were all speaking of technology and innovation, and definitely bringing this into the affordable marketing, affordable housing sector is important. And that's what we'd like to do through BASE and through the Hilti Foundation and all the partners that we have, together with Habitat for Humanity as well. Marife was discussing about where building should be, how to mitigate disasters. So equally important on how to build is where we should build. And for us in the BASE and the Hilti Foundation, we really, it's quite important for us to focus our efforts in developing a technology that delivers the quality housing. So the building side. But before entering into something, we take a look at where we build. What is the ecosystem around? Are there schools? Are there all the necessary facilities for a community to thrive independently that involves livelihood? So for anything to be sustainable, we build houses that are disaster resilient, but it also needs to be replicable and scalable, especially when we're speaking of housing for the most vulnerable. So equally important is sharing this technology so that we can bring it to the scale that creates the greater impact in society. It's really building better today so that we have more resilient cities and communities tomorrow. So listening to the people is definitely important, and getting both public and private organizations together.
Thank you, Marison, for a summary from your end. And what was also coming in clearly is that we are kind of not building houses, but we are helping others build their homes, right? I think that was kind of an inspiring one-liner as well. I would like now to call Mardi Mapa Suplido to join us, the CEO of Habitat of Humanity Philippines, to present virtual plaques of appreciations to our speakers.
Thank you, Manya. Again, we received so much inspiring learning to equip us to build better. Before we thank our speakers, let me first apologize to all our participants on behalf of Habitat Philippines for all the technical platform, sound, internet, and delay challenges we had this morning. And thank you for bearing with us. Yeah. So, on behalf of Habitat for Humanity Philippines and the Asia Pacific Office, our event sponsors and partners, I'd like to present our plaque of appreciation that reads, okay, this plaque of recognition is presented to Mr. Chris Rollo, Country Program Manager for UN Habitat. Okay. We have for Dr. Marife Ballesteros, Vice President for the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. For Mr. Rajan Samuel, Managing Director for Habitat for Humanity India. Okay. Ms. Maricen Halandoni, President and Chair of BASE Baha'i Foundation. And of course, our plenary moderator, Ms. Manya, Vidic, head of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Philippines, for all your valuable contribution as our Plenary 1 speakers on building resilient cities and communities at the Philippine Housing Forum 2021, Building Forward Better for Inclusive Housing. You've been super instrumental in elevating housing to the center of the national agenda and seeking innovative, sustainable, and affordable and climate resilient solutions to our country's housing issues. Signed by Lourdes Gutierrez Alfonso, Chair of the Habitat Board of Trustees, and Mr. Luis Noda, Asia Pacific Vice President for Habitat for Humanity International. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mardi, for this flex of appreciation. I think it was a great session. We had to improvise a bit, but I think we kind of got kind of interesting inputs from all of you, and you were able to share, I think, very interesting perspective and very different perspectives. So contributing to the forum. Now we'll be followed by the breakout sessions within this track. So there will be Building Resilient Cities and Communities breakout session 4, I believe. So do please stay online. Wish you a good and productive day to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have just finished plenary session 1 on building resilient cities and communities. We will now be divided into breakout sessions. You can now see on your screen 3 breakout rooms that you can select from. Please simply click the session that you registered to join. Thank you and see you all in the breakout rooms.
Nagsimula sa isang pangarap. Ika'y tutulungang ibahin ang buhay na nakasanayan.
For those who are in the plenary breakout room you would like to join, we have 3 breakout rooms. Breakout room session 1 is on inclusive and sustainable resilient program for informal sector families. Breakout 2, scaling housing resilience through homeowner-driven construction. And breakout room 3, boosting community disaster readiness. Kindly click which breakout room session you would like to join. Thank you.